silence. Still got 25 seconds, so don't get too excited. 90. Tell me when I'm live, Tom. Well, welcome to Inclusive Gathering Birmingham. My name is Danielle, and my pronouns are she, her. It's really great to see you this evening, whether you're with us in Edgbaston or whether you're watching online. It's a big welcome. For those who are watching online, there's actually a Zoom table discussion, a Zoom table that's happening all throughout, and there's some links on our website on how to find it, and Julia is going to be leading a little discussion group there throughout. So today is a bit different from what we normally do. We've done one of these. This is called Real Talk and Afternoon Tea, where we have a little bit of time around tables. We bring in somebody who's really knowledgeable about a subject to lead some discussion and have some Q&A just while we're chatting, and gives us time to connect with each other and to just think about what the Christian faith brings to some of the big issues of the day. So today I'll introduce Naomi in a minute. But I just wanted to say a little bit about Inclusive Gathering, if this is your first time. We often call ourselves a learning community, and I think if you're gonna encapsulate what the church is in any two words, it would probably be those. And that basically means that we're learning together all the time how we grow in our ability to include and love other people. So for us, it's really core to our spirituality to constantly be widening the circle, opening the table, and thinking about who's left out and how we allow them the freedom and the choice to come and sit at the table with us. So a lot of the things that we do are around that. So I want to say, especially if it's your first time, this is not the kind of place where you need to pretend to agree. If you disagree with something, that's totally fine. We practice getting used to having different views, different opinions, wrestling with spiritual doubt, wrestling with spiritual joy. And we want you to feel like this is a place where you can feel at home to kind of figure out this whole faith thing with us, or just be here as a kind of a rest in a peaceful space, whether that's in the virtual space or in this physical space here in Edgbaston. So unfortunately, if you're online, you can't see that we've got lovely little tables all around with tea lights and some really nice snacks at the back. But if you're here in person, feel free at any point today to get up. I know it feels a little bit awkward because, we're not used to being able to move freely in these days and times, but you are actually allowed to get up and go to the back and grab some tea and coffee and some cakes that are presented in a very COVID-safe way. And also at the back, there is a whole station about Advent where you can grab some Advent coloring. There's some mindfulness coloring about hope. There's also a Celtic Advent Wreath that's really fancy that you can color in, and grab a set of tea lights to go with it. So when you go back home to your house, if you want to light candles on your own as part of your own celebration and remembrance of Advent, you can do that. And there's also a little booklet down the table about Advent that we're going to tell you about in a little bit. So I'm going to introduce today's speaker. It's one of my dearest friends in the world, Naomi Bennett-Steel, who's our resident scientist, I often say. So I'll let you come on up here and explain science. Naomi's going to be talking to us today about the climate crisis and where is there hope? What is it that people of faith have to bring to this kind of discussion, which can often feel quite fatalistic and hopeless? Where is our hope? So the way it will work today is Naomi's going to share a bit now, and then about halfway through, we're going to have a little 15-minute break to grab cake and snacks and to chat around tables. And if you've got questions throughout on your tables, if you're in Edgbaston, you can write them down and stick them on the board at the back, and we'll try to get to as many of them later in the Q&A as we can. If you're online, write them in your chat, and we'll include them as well. So anyway, we'll do Q&A later, and we're also going to be lighting an Advent candle later on and singing an Advent song. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Naomi, who's going to talk with us.
Brilliant. Hello. Oh, is this on? I can speak relatively louder than this if you want me to, but how am I doing? Hello? That sounds better, doesn't it? Brilliant. Hello? Wave at me at the back if you can hear me. Fantastic. We like that. I hope people on Zoom can hear me as well. So yes, I am Naomi. I will take a minute to explain my science credentials so that nobody sues me for saying anything bad. So yeah, I have a science background. I'm completing my PhD technically in chemical engineering at the University of Birmingham, but what I really do is make eye drops, which doesn't have a lot to do with climate change. So I am not a climate scientist, but I am someone who is really passionate about this issue and has done my own research, but by no means am I an expert. So take everything I say with a pinch of salt, but hopefully what I say will start to make a bit of sense. And as much as I'm not going to go off and list things that you need to go away and do, this is more of a conversation about what kind of our faith is bringing into this conversation, and one of the most difficult to understand, most difficult to comprehend issues of our time. So yes, I'm going to start with the question that was kind of, how this talk was pitched to me by Danielle, which was, do you need to be middle class to care about the environment? And there are a lot of layers to that question that I kind of want to peel back. So firstly, what does caring about the environment look like? Now, the first thing is, the people who are going to be most affected and first affected by climate change are people of colour in countries that are less economically developed than ours. We're already seeing droughts, we're already seeing floods over, sub-Saharan Africa, in the Middle East, but even now in places like Germany and Canada. And typically, it is not people who have the means to be able to escape, the means to be able to move and uproot their lives and choose a different life that get most affected by this. And so this is deeply rooted to, there is no climate crisis which is separate from the quote-unquote migration crisis. People are already becoming homeless and becoming refugees as a result of things that are happening. And I do realise this is already painting a bit of a bleak picture, but I promise I am going to not just make things really sad for the next 20 minutes. The other thing, as a bit of a caveat that I want to start with, is what are we talking about when we talk about the climate crisis, when we talk about environmentalism or the environment or caring about the environment? And there are a lot of things that kind of get mixed up. So not using plastic straws isn't going to have an effect on the temperature. Those things are not directly connected, but the biggest kind of overarching problem and the problem that started getting our attention is this global warming, is the fact that the temperature of the world on average is increasing comparing to what it used to be before the Industrial Revolution. And what this means is, as the temperature goes up, and this is due to gases like carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, as they're called, what happens is they go into the air and they intensify what the sun does, and it makes things hotter. And that changes the weather, it changes the way that all these different intricate systems work that have developed over thousands of years and that we've adapted to stay alive and to become human over the millions of years that occurred. So that's a bit of a caveat on what we're talking about in terms of climate. As a result of climate change is kind of the big one, and that's related to fossil fuels and those carbon dioxide gases and everything else. What we also see is environmental decline, environmental destruction, and that's kind of as a result of our wasteful behaviour, when we put plastic in the ocean, all those kind of things. So they're all related, but not exactly the same. So that's why recycling isn't necessarily going to stop carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere and that kind of thing. But that's just a massive, slightly boring preface, but I think it's important to get some of the terms right before we talk about something like this. And I'm happy to take any questions on anything like that after as well. So anyway, do you have to be middle class to care about the environment? So as we've already said, it's not quote-unquote middle-class, affluent people who are going to be primarily affected by what is going on in the world, what's going on with climate change and environmental degradation. What is also true is that it is affluent people who are causing most of the problems. So there seems to be a narrative, and we see this a lot, normally again kind of rich, usually white celebrities saying what we need to do to halt climate change, to slow it down, is to reduce the birth rate in sub-Saharan Africa, or we need to stop people in sub-Saharan Africa, burning wood and coal and other things. That is a tiny, tiny drop in the bucket compared to what we're doing in the Western world in terms of our emissions from industry, from flying, from everything else. And this is where there's a bit of a conflict of interest in terms of, people whose whole lifestyle is built upon a kind of celebrity lifestyle and using private jets and jetting around, telling people who produce a fraction of those emissions that they need to change the way they live. And we see that globally, but we also see that in this country, where there's this thing of, poor people, people living in poverty, people who are working class, and those things aren't necessarily the same. They don't care, and they don't drive electric cars, and they don't do this, and they don't do that, and they don't care. And again, even in this country, it is people who have less income, who have less opportunities, who are maybe traditionally working class and live in working class communities, who are most affected by what's going on. So I work for a national lung health charity, and one of the biggest issues that we see, again, from burning fossil fuels and these activities that increase the amount of bad stuff that's in the environment is air pollution. And this has a really, really significant effect on people's lives and health. And the people who are most affected are people who are living in, demographically poorer areas. And again, it affects majority people of colour. We see years being taken off people's lives because of air pollution and these effects. So again, sorry to keep introducing really sad things into what we're talking about, but it's really important to kind of set the scene first. So, with this narrative that being kind of environmentally conscious is a middle-class pastime, I think where this has come from is slowly, as our awareness of climate change has increased, and it's become something that is covered relatively in the media, and that's a whole other kind of topic. But as it's something that has kind of gained traction in the general population, what's happened is there inherently within the facts and within the awareness of climate change, there is a threat to the status quo. There is a threat to the way things are and the way things stand. And the immediate reaction of the current systems that we have in place to any kind of threat is to sell you the answer. So what's happened is the environmentalism, which started off really as kind of the image of people who cared about the environment, was kind of antisocial hippies. It was, would be described as anti-British. Basically people like me who are vegan lesbians. That was, that was the image of someone who cares about the environment. But what's happened as it's gained traction is that people have gone, all right, people care about this. What can we sell them to make them feel better or make them feel like they're making a difference? And so whole lifestyles have sprung up around what it means to be environmentally conscious that focus on, going on holiday in the UK rather than going abroad, recycling everything, driving an electric car, all these kind of things. And I'm not saying that any of those things are bad, but those things are not the answer to the global problem that we face. And again, it's a really kind of clever push to put the responsibility for this onto individuals rather than saying the system as a whole is broken and it's not working. And so how many people have an awareness of what your carbon footprint is, or at least know what the idea of, if I say a carbon footprint, could you take a guess at what it is that I'm talking about? Get some nods, yeah. So the idea of a carbon footprint was actually developed by BP, or British Petroleum, because there was an idea that was developed by Canadian scientists which was called an ecological footprint, which was how much land basically an activity required to be sustaining. So, how much farmland do we need to sustain a population of X size? And what BP did was they essentially paid a marketing company to take this idea and turn it into the idea of a personal carbon footprint. So what are you doing? What choices are you making to reduce the amount of carbon that you put into the atmosphere? The issue with that is we, on the consumer end of this system, so us who are making decisions about what we buy and where we go, we are accountable for only a small amount of everything that is being done and the emissions and everything else that are going into the environment. So as much as, yes, part of changing the system is changing the way that we live on an individual basis and increasing the demand for new ways of living, new ways of being. And in some, I'm going to go into a little bit of what we talk about in kind of new versus old as well. But the main kind of push has been, it's our responsibility as individuals to make better choices and to do more things that improve the outlook in terms of what we're doing for the environment. And as much as that is important, that is not the only thing that needs to happen. And that is, that's square one, that is what, at the moment, it feels like we have control over. And so it's definitely a good place to start, but it's absolutely not going to get us over the line. And this is where the kind of blame game has been introduced as well. So it's like, if it's down to us to make better choices as individuals, it then becomes really easy to blame people who don't actually really have a choice and don't have that luxury. At the end of the day, it is expensive to make these decisions. Electric cars are more expensive than a 20-year-old whatever that is the only thing that you have access to. But it is that combination of things, and we're only going to increase the access to people who currently don't really have a choice about what they do if there is change from the top as well. So, kind of spun and spiraled down a load of different avenues there, and that's, I think, an expression of how complicated and how connected this issue is with everything else. And that's where I think we start to have a look at what our faith brings into this conversation. Because I think fundamentally, at the heart of this issue, and at the heart of everything that I just explained, is the idea that our choices as individuals are separate from what is going on around us and what everyone else decides to do. The idea that essentially there is such thing as just an individual choice, that we're not shaped by the other people around us, by the systems that we live as a part of. And if we look at our approach to the environment, that's exactly what's gone wrong. Is up until this point we've thought, well, it doesn't really matter what we do, this system is designed for us. We are the centre of the universe, and we can extract, we can take, we can burn, we can do whatever, and it doesn't matter because we're people and we're the top of the food chain. And that neglects the fact that we are part of a really complex, beautiful ecosystem that has developed over, hundreds of millions of years to sustain life and to sustain us. But that means we are connected to every other living thing, every other system, every other process that occurs in nature. We depend on that to live. We depend on that to function. And what's gone wrong is our relationship to that, our relationship to each other, and our relationship to the rest of the natural world. And I think, unfortunately, some of our response to COVID has shown that as well. It's come down to, especially it feels in recent kind of months and weeks, it's about your personal choice. What personal choice are you going to make, without the acknowledgement that actually we protect each other together. That's the fundamental of public health is we are a community, and the decisions of everyone matter if this is actually going to work. And that's a direct, that's directly replicable when we talk about the environment as well. So what do we bring as Christians to this idea that we belong to each other, that we are community? And that's the first place for me that I start to bring a sense of hopefulness back into this conversation, because everything I started with is a little bit bleak and does make me very angry. But if I then reflect on my experience in church and my experience of faith, everything from, my growing up to coming out to falling out of love with it to falling back in love with it here and with this group of people, it's, if I look around the room and I look at what we're doing here, we have something to say about what it means to be community. We have something to say about what it means to take care of each other and to exist in relationship with each other, even when it's hard and even when there are challenges that are much bigger than just us that we need to overcome. We are not going to solve homophobia and transphobia in this room, but aren't we making a good start? Aren't, by loving each other, we making a great first step to making the world a slightly brighter place for people to be whoever they want to be? And that's exactly the same approach that we have to bring into conversations about the environment and about climate change. Is no, we are not going to fix it on our own. But that's the point. The point is we're not on our own. We are part of a community. We are part of something much bigger than ourselves. And it's taken us a really long time to understand that and to respect that. But that understanding is here. We've got really clever, really great people who are telling us something has gone wrong. But in fixing it, we don't just get to fix, the climate crisis. It's all connected. So a more climate just world is a more racially just world. A more climate just world is a more gender equal world. A more climate just world is a world where people get to thrive, they get to live to their full potential, they get to live in a way that they're not exploited, and we are not exploiting the natural environment around us. We get to live in balance and harmony, and that's exciting, and that feels like what the kingdom of God would feel like, that we get to live out justice in every sense of that word, and in every relationship, be that interpersonal, be that with us and the tiny little microbes in our gut that we need to digest things. Like, there is a balance that has been beautifully introduced to nature since the very beginning. And I'm not a theologian, and I don't expect everyone to agree with my theology on this, so that's just a bit of a caveat. But, I believe that the first incarnation was creation. The first, expression of God into form, into stuff and beauty was the creation of what we see around us. And there is a beautiful system of relationship that is at the heart of God, and we see that in the Trinity, that is translated into the way that we live and the way that we thrive and the way that the world thrives around us. And by being a truer reflection of that, we bring that kingdom of God into reality. And so this big, scary thing, which is, and it is genuinely scary, it is genuinely a threat. Luckily, we have the answers, because it is just about becoming a truer expression of God's love as we see in the gospel. It's a truer expression of what it means to be in relationship with each other, to be in community, and to live out justice. And that's why I think we bring... if we do this well, we bring hope into this conversation, because it can be done. And it might start small, but, we have lots of parables about mustard seeds and everything else. Like, so the size doesn't matter, because it will grow and it will grow and it will expand. And there is so much that we can take from this process if we just get on board with that transformation. And I think that's a good place for me to stop for now.
Thanks, Naomi. We're just going to take now just about 15 minutes to sit and chat around tables. So maybe think about, is there something in particular that stood out to you from what Naomi shared? Do you have questions that are burning that have come up, or questions that you've been hanging on to for a long time? You can write them on the little post-its on your table or on the chat on Facebook Live. If you're in the room, there's a little chalkboard at the back that you can stick your post-its on, or just hang on to your question, and Eunice is going to field the Q&A in a little while. So in about 15 minutes, we'll come back and we're going to light the Advent candle together, but feel free to get up, do coloring, do cakes, chat. See you in a little bit. Okay, I hope you enjoyed your coffee and your tea and your cake and your chat. We're gonna reconvene now, and I'm gonna invite my friend Faith up in a moment to talk to us a little bit about Advent. If you haven't, at the back table, there's these. I started coloring mine. We did these last year when we were in lockdown, and I thought they're a really nice thing to do again. They're Celtic Advent wreaths, and you can color and design them yourselves, and then cut them out and stick them on a heat-proof plate. And there's a little set of tea lights that are the same colors as these kind of liturgical candles that you can light yourself as part of your kind of, I don't know, your own celebration of Advent at home or whatever, whether you're joining us online or whatever. So if you don't have a chance to color while you're here, feel free to grab one on your way out. Yeah, I'm going to invite Faith up, who's going to talk to us a little bit about Advent and light the Advent candle with us.
Hi, it's Danielle. As Danielle was saying, I'm Faith, and I'm going to introduce some things about Advent. I grew up in a tradition that didn't celebrate Advent, so I appreciate getting to learn about it these last several years. And Advent literally means the entry of something significant, and in the case of the Christian calendar, it's the entry of God into the world in human flesh in the body of Jesus. So I really appreciated when Naomi was talking about incarnation and the idea of creation. And in Christian theology, we think of the incarnation as the actual enfleshment of God come to walk among us and show us what it is to be human with one another. And when we talk about what it means to be community, it's like we're Christians, we're not any community, we're specifically the community that is the body of Jesus continuing on that work in the world and receiving the Holy Spirit and becoming his body, essentially a continuation of the incarnation, the embodiment of God in the world. So that's what we're going to be celebrating over the next few weeks, and to me that is just mind-blowingly beautiful and wonderful and incredible. And so Red Letter Christians UK, who we do some things with, I helped produce this little Advent calendar. If you'd like, you can download this online. I'm sure there will be ways on the website that you can access it. So each Sunday, we're going to be lighting an Advent candle together. And you can do this whether you're in person with us or at home, online, or just doing it on your own. And you'll see there's also those Advent wreaths, as Danielle was talking about, and the kits. And today we're lighting the candle for hope, which is very appropriate. And so if you're interested, if you're following along in the Red Letter Christians booklet, today's reading, if you want to do this, you can read Matthew 1:1 through 17. I'm not going to read it all right now. But focus on Jesus' genealogy, and I found this significant because the Jewish people, if you read through that, they lived through so many generations that were marked by oppression and exile, and they were that whole time hopefully waiting for the Messiah to come. And just as you light that candle, you can focus on the centuries of struggle during which those communities battled their own despair. And this week, I would encourage you to pray and consider how faith in Jesus sustains our hope in challenging times. And so right now we're going to be doing this Advent liturgy together. And so when I say we light a candle for hope, you can respond with, "May it light the way." As winter days dim and bow to early darkness, you, God of light, set watch in the night sky and beckon the wise to follow. When hope hangs low in the human heart, you, loving Creator, kindle compassion, breathing life into the early embers of change and empathy. We light a candle for hope, sending prayers high into the inky heavens and dreams deep into the human soul. As Advent dawns, God of all hope, shine your light on the story of the saints who journeyed before us. May the seeds they planted in the world, peace, joy, love, take hold in our hearts and stretch towards the light. We light a candle for hope. May it light the way.
Okay, we're just going to sing an Advent carol. I'm told this is the American tune. I apologize. Come thou long expected Jesus. Invite you to sing with us. It's best if you can wear a mask when you sing, just because we're being aware of the people around us. Invite Naomi back up, and Eunice is going to come up with her as well with some questions for time for Q&A.
Oh, it's a bit squished. You've got some great questions here. So Naomi, these form kind of 5 particular areas.
Right.
Developing countries,
Yep.
multinationals,
Yep.
the government,
Yep.
the church,
Yep.
and us personally.
Great.
5 massive areas, 5 massive questions. And the
Fantastic.
questions really go into those 5 categories. Where would you like to start?
Let's start with lower middle income countries.
So developing countries.
Developing countries, yeah.
Yeah. So the question here, with equality and climate, how do we balance this for developing countries that have rapidly developed, like China, who are consuming fossil fuels at a rate that developed countries already have? And there's a subset to that around developing countries, around the contradictory thing of supporting your local communities and fair trade and local shops, buying local, and actually those possibly haven't taken a longer journey and taken up more of the Earth's resources.
Yeah. So again, so I'm going to start with the second question first, in the contradiction between supporting kind of fair trade and developing countries and developing communities worldwide, and buying local. And we were having a little bit of a conversation about this on our table, is that it's really hard for us as individuals to do that maths and to try and figure out what is the best decision about every single piece of produce or every single thing that you need to buy. That is so much expectation to put on ourselves, and we're never going to get it all right all the time. And so I think it's really important that we remove any sense of guilt from these kind of decisions, because there is just too much information for all of us individually to process about this kind of thing. And a lot of the time people are just trying to do the right thing. So knocking someone on the head with it is just really not the right way to go. So I think that's just a really important thing to like preface it with. The flip side of that is there are some really intelligent people who have made really good recommendations about national policies and strategies that we could put in place to manage this, so that it's not on us as individuals to make these decisions. So tariffs on how things are imported, how things are produced, how policies about where our produce comes from in our local shops, all of that kind of thing. There are people who know much more than me and who are much smarter than me have developed really good answers to these solutions, and what we need is a political will to make changes to things on a structural level so that it makes the choices that we then make a lot easier. So as much as, yes, we do want to try and make the right decisions, I do want to preface this with it's been made way too hard for us to make the right decisions, and that's not right. But saying that, obviously things like fair trade and those kind of standards, I think it's a really well-intentioned way of trying to improve. Part of the problem that we see is that part of the exploitative nature of the way that we produce things is we don't only exploit the environment, we exploit people who have significantly less money than us, and we don't pay them right, and it maintains systems of poverty that allow us as a country, as Britain, to maintain the wealth that we have. And so buying things like fair trade, as much as it's good, again, it's not going to fix that problem. This year, this budget and previous budgets, we've cut the amount of aid that we provide to other countries, and as much as that, again, is a flawed system, it shows that politically our approach to this is moving backwards, and we're not interested in being part of the global solution to some of these challenges, and that's a really bad thing. In terms of, can you just repeat the question so that I make sure I get it right, the kind of second half of it?
The contradictory convictions around local greengrocer only sells Asian and Afro-Caribbean fruit and veg that has come halfway around the world, and the whole challenge of the only fair trade bananas are in plastic cartons, and the way you get one thing right and do the other thing wrong. That's a really good point.
I think I don't have an answer to this, because I personally can't do the maths on those things to say this is the right answer, but I think my answer is we shouldn't have to do the maths on those things. At the end of the day, if the choice that you make is to support your local greengrocer, then that's a good choice. If the choice that you make is to support fair trade, that is a good choice. You're trying to do the right thing, and that's all that we can really expect of ourselves, is to try and make slightly better choices. But the real thing we need to do is try and increase the political will to make making those choices a lot simpler and a lot easier.
Fab. I think to some extent you've answered this question in that one, but I'll just pause it again in case you want to. So this is about multinationals, and the questions around are summed up in, can we, and if so, how, do we best put pressure on multinationals to build sustainable infrastructures?
Yep. So the way that this has kind of been pitched to us so far is that in this current system, we as consumers, as people who choose what we buy, create the pressure by choosing to buy certain things, and that creates the demand, and then people will shift to fill the demand. But again, the flaw in that is only a very small section of society can make that choice. Other people are choosing to survive, they're choosing to live, and that means making, they're not going to care if, their beef has come from Argentina or Wales. That's really, again, where the pressure has to come from us onto people who can put in place tariffs, who can put in place taxes, who can put in place the infrastructure that is necessary to, again, make the choices that we make easier. So in terms of multinational corporations, this is the sticking point. Unfortunately, our government depends on the support of multinational corporations to govern to fund their political parties, to, it's not the other way around. It's not that the government decides what the businesses do. At the moment, business decides what the government does. And unfortunately, the only way we get out of that is by capitalising on any and all the political agency that we have, and increasing the agency that people who don't have a lot of it have. So, there are a lot of amazing people doing great community organising work, and community organising is based on the principle that together we can achieve a lot more than a load of individual voices. And as whole communities, we've got a much stronger pull and a much stronger voice than we would do as individuals, and that's how we create agency, especially within communities where individual agency is not particularly high for various reasons.
Great answer. I remember, Naomi, when John and I went to West Africa many years ago, went to Senegal, and in lots of places where there was no access to clean water, there were fridges with Coca-Cola bottles in. And you could buy Coca-Cola, but you couldn't get a bottle of clean water. And I'm like, crikey. And Coca-Cola are one of the many, I'm calling out Coca-Cola there, but one of the many multinationals who've just absolutely running around exploiting.
I'm going to be really explicit here, and again, this is very political, so it is what it is. But companies are not going to fix this, because companies exist and have thrived within the system that created this problem. They physically can't fix it, because that would make themselves irrelevant and run out of business and whatever else. So, we can't look to Amazon and say, great, you've got loads of money, are you going to fix this? Because that's just not how the system works. It can't. As soon as Amazon started to say, great, we're going to channel all of our money into creating green solutions for things, their value would go down. They would lose shares and all of that, because they rely on the system as it is to have the wealth that they have. So we've got to create the pressure ourselves, and it is going to be a difficult transition. Things have to significantly change. This isn't something that we just tweak.
Fabulous answer. Again, Naomi, you're doing great at answering the next question within the next, so you're right on it here.
Everything is connected.
It is, isn't it? So this is a question about the government. Basically, two questions about the government. What do you think the government should do to encourage us to be more green? And the second part of the question is, why do you think they aren't doing more? And you've already hinted at a bit of that. So what do you think the government could do to encourage us? Why don't they?
It depends who you mean by us here. I got really annoyed the other day because I got asked by someone who works in government to submit. They were doing a call out for videos, and it was like, what thing are you doing to help the environment? And I was like, can you please ask the government the same question? Because I can tell you that I don't have a car and I walk and get the train to work, but what are the government doing? Because that's what I really want to know. So yes, there are things that the government can do that makes our choices easier, and we've touched on that already. But to encourage, the government have been doing a lot of encouraging us to do stuff. We need to do a lot more of encouraging the government to do stuff, because really it lies with them. We can do what we can do, but what we can do is limited by them at the moment.
Fabulous. Okay, the church. Here we go. What? We've got to ask ourselves the same questions, haven't we?
My favourite topic.
Yeah. What can we do as a church to enable our siblings to thrive without depleting the resources of the planet? That's a big question. And then just general questions are, what should we do as a church? So a macro and a...
Yeah. So I didn't touch on this as much as I probably thought I was going to. But, I mean, I think we had a really amazing conversation with Gerald Robinson-Brown with Red Light Christians, and I know he's coming to speak at Inclusive Gathering in a couple months' time, in February. And we touched on this idea of hope, and he really he has so much wisdom. And what he shared was that hope has to start in a place of truth. You can't have hope if you haven't borne witness to the truth first. And I think there's a lot of that needs to happen in the church. We need to bear witness and to the truth that the spreading of Eurocentric white Christianity was laid the foundation for the crisis that we are currently in. We destroyed indigenous communities that lived in balance with the earth and had really solid principles about how to live within your means and to see the sacredness in creation around us. And the type of Christianity that we enforced upon those communities was in direct opposition to that, and the strands of that still exist within what is taught in churches today. We believe that humans are the centre of the universe. We believe that only humanity bears the image of God, and that gives us freedom to do whatever we want with the rest of the world. And I just don't believe that that is true. And it gives us so much license to do bad things. And the other side of this is believing that what happens here doesn't matter, because what is waiting for us is the thing that really matters. So the idea of having a heaven that is separate to what happens here on earth is like, well, it doesn't really matter. This is just our playground until we die, and then we go to heaven, and that's where the important stuff really happens. And again, we have to separate ourselves from that mentality, because this world that was created through, again, like I said, I believe this is part of the incarnation, is the creation of this world, this is meaningful to God. God is around us in this place. We are not waiting to be transported off to some other place. This place matters. And this is the place where Jesus was, and this is the place where we experience God. And so we can't stop selling people's, we have to stop selling people spiritual life insurance and telling them that what they do here and now doesn't matter.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Some good theology there. Okay, individuals. So this is a kind of really practical one. Naomi, should I switch to an electric car or wait a year or two? That's a very practical question.
Very practical question. So the most efficient car you have is the car that you have. And what I mean by that is it takes a lot of energy and a lot of resource to make new cars. And so the chances are, within the lifetime of the car that you currently have, you are not going to produce as much emissions as what you would if you bought a new car, especially because, unfortunately, the batteries that go into electric cars, to make them is quite a nasty chemical process and isn't particularly clean in itself. So again, electric cars aren't the silver bullet that people want them to be. And the most... As a general rule with anything, don't buy new anything if you've got something that works. Because the thing that you've got that works is the most efficient thing that you can have, because it means you're not then, A, creating waste by getting rid of the other thing, and B, not creating waste by making a new thing that you don't need.
That's a great answer. Joel and I were having a chat. I was telling Joel about John's grandma died when she was over 100. And one of the things that she really got wound up by was she'd had a fridge for like 30 years, and she bought a new fridge. And after 5 years, it broke. And she was like, what's the matter with this fridge? The other one lasted 30. If things have progressed, why doesn't this fridge last longer? But that built-in obsolescence, which is a disaster. So,
to touch on that, so my primary degree was in materials engineering. And so what we talk about is embodied carbon, which is the amount of, by the time something reaches you at home, the amount of carbon that has gone into making that. And unfortunately, a lot of this stuff comes with so much embodied carbon, it's not worth it. Right. But also, as a design principle, people want things to fail because then you buy more stuff. Yeah. So when we talk about reduce, reuse, recycle, they're not on a par. Reduce first, reuse, and then as an absolute last resort, recycle. So do those first two really, really well, and you shouldn't need to do the third or even waste stuff.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Okay, more personal questions. Where should our activism energy go?
Again, this is this is such a big topic, and as I hope I've demonstrated, everything is connected. So this, climate change isn't separate to, the rights of people of colour. It's not separate to the rights of trans people. It's not, the same system that hurts people is the same system that is creating the climate disaster. So your energy should firstly and always lie with taking care of your own mental health and safety first. Secondly, and I emphasise that even more for this community, because being queer people who thrive is activism in itself, right? being happy and joyous as LGBT people is in itself a form of activism, because everything in this world tries to make that not the case. So don't put pressure on yourself to do any more than that. Secondly, put your activism where you care. I've had lots of conversations with people who really just cannot engage with it because it feels like such a big abstract thing. But, you know, what they really care about is the fact that there's a load of rubbish in their local park and it ruins their dog walk. If that's where you start, that's where you start. You've got to find a connection to this somehow, and you're only going to find that if it's natural and organic. Being shamed into something isn't a sustainable form of activism. Fear isn't a sustainable form of activism. You've got to do this because you love it, because it's got to be born out of love. So find something that you love, and that is a great place to start, and it will be the right place to start because everything is connected.
Naomi, that was fabulous. Thank you so much. It's just fabulous. Bless your heart. Danielle.
Yeah, there are any more questions?
Yes. Any more questions? There were several little questions that are gathered into the big questions, but that doesn't stop you asking even more questions.
That feels like a no.
Great.
Yeah. Huge thanks to Naomi. Thank you, Venus, too. I feel like we need to bottle those questions. That Q&A was magic right there. There's so much good stuff. I think I'm gonna go back and listen to it. Make a good blog post too. My brain is still in climate change. Let me move to Christmas. So I want to just tell you about a few of the things that are coming up over the next couple of weeks. So next week is the first gathering of the month. We are not here. We are at the old library in Edgbaston, we needed a bit of a bigger venue than this because we're having EEK, which is my band, that are going to come and play our annual Christmas gig with Inclusive Gathering. So it's a loudish event with full bands and contemporary versions of carols. It's gonna be lots of fun, loads of cake. There's gonna be creative areas. We're also doing it in aid of Journey LGBT Asylum Seekers group. Every year we choose a group to support with what we do. So what we're asking is that if you'd like to bring something, we're collecting gifts for the LGBT Asylum Seekers group's Christmas party. And they've asked if people could bring a small package of cookies or sweets, gift wrapped with a little personal note to someone that's in the group. And just keep in mind that the asylum seekers that are part of the Journey group are from all faith traditions and none, so just kind of be open in your language that you use. And it'd be lovely to have 30 or so little mini gifts to give out at their Christmas party. And you'll notice that some of the folks from Journey come along to IGB once a month or so. So we'd love to have you join us. It'll be a big party and fun. But I will say that I know that not everybody enjoys a band at Christmas time. So we have several other things. The week after, we are back here in Edgbaston for Cozy Christmas. There we go. Which Nets is organizing, which is going to be a quieter, chilled out affair with little things we can make for Christmas gifts and just for joyous kind of stuff ourselves. There's loads of cake and cozy little corners to just be able to have a reflective time. We're going to be doing more Advent candles, and it should be a lovely, chilled out, softer kind of a gathering. Then the week after that, I won't go too far in the future, don't worry. The week after that is the Open Table Christmas gathering, which is, we're part of the group that's helping to launch the Open Table Network in Birmingham, working with Wild Green URC. And so to kick that off, we're having the Rainbow Voices Choir, it's the leading LGBT choir in the Midlands, come and do some songs with us as we do 9 lessons in carols. It'll be quite a traditional service that's going to be led in Wild Green, and the sanctuary is all things Christmas. It's this really beautiful church room with a lovely tree, and it'll be really lovely. And a number of us will be taking part in leading. Gary's going to be playing and that'll be lovely. Then over Christmas itself, this building isn't open. So Christmas Eve, we're partnering with Jazz Community Church and the Cambridge Methodist Church for a Jazz Christingle. And then on Christmas Day, which is, I keep saying, it's like the best time to watch church in your pajamas if you don't, who wants to go out on Christmas Day? And so there's going to be an online live service for anybody that wants to participate in that, or you could watch it any time of the day, really. So anyway, then after that, the next time we're back here in person is the 9th of January for our first big gathering of the year. And you can just look out online for all of that information, because obviously I said it really quickly, and who would remember what I just said? Probably no one. I'm going to hand over to Naomi for just a moment.
Cool. I can remember where we are. Brilliant. So yeah, as we all know, making this stuff happen requires time, it requires people's skills, and it requires, material resource as well in the form of money and other things. And so we want to encourage everyone to give what they can in terms of making this happen. This only happens because a lot of people volunteer their amazing time and skills, people like Tom, who sits there and makes sure this all works. So there's lots of ways that you can get involved. We haven't been passing the bucket round in terms of collecting money. Are we doing that today?
No, there's a little bucket at the door.
There's a bucket at the door. It just makes it slightly more COVID safe. So if material resource is something that you can give towards making this happen, then please do, but please don't feel any pressure to do that either. And then also with our upcoming Christmas events, there's a lot of time and skills that we need to make those happen. So if you feel like that's something that you can give and to help make that happen, then there is a sign-up list. I think everyone's got one, on their seat, and you can put them in the buckets as well. And also you can send an email.
Great, yeah. Yeah, and the easiest way I would say to give is online at the moment. So if you go to our website, there's a little link you can click, and it's easy if that's something you'd like to do. But there's no pressure. Joel, can you come up for a moment?
Just very briefly, if the issue of climate action is still, there's lots of questions still in your mind and want to do more things and think about it more, then you can listen to a new podcast that I just started called Action Stations. If you go to Spotify and just type in Action Stations, it will be the podcast that comes up. There was a podcast that was released last year called Everybody Now, which was an hour and 45 minutes of very sobering stuff and very inspiring. But because it was an hour and 45 minutes, it was way too much to take in, that sense of being really overwhelmed by these statistics, but also some really heartfelt stuff. So the idea is what we're doing with Action Stations is we pick apart Everybody Now and just take tiny chunks of the other podcast, listen to it, and then say, how are we going to do things? How can we take action while not being, dissolving, drowning in a little pool of guilt? So Action Stations on Spotify, if you want to.
Thanks, Joel. One more thing I'll add to my long list of announcements. Sorry I do that. We've just opened registration for our retreat in the new year. The last weekend of January, we're doing our first IGB weekend away. Yeah, and it's actually not very far. It's at the greenhouse at Barnes Close, which is just near Bromsgrove. So we'd love to have as many folks join us as they'd like to. You can either sleep in your own bed or come and stay overnight or something like that. There's information online, but feel free to sign up. So that's it for now. If you've got any questions, feel free to grab me after or send me an email. And I'm just going to finish with the blessing that we share every week. May we live fully, may we love wastefully, and may we have the courage to be all that God has created us to be. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next week at the old library.